Welcome to Poirot Stories, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings captivating mysteries to life.
In the shadowed halls of Ravenstone Manor, a scream pierces the night. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne lies dead, poisoned by a trusted hand. Who among her family betrayed her? A cryptic note whispers of broken trust. A missing key hides dark secrets, and a locket holds a clue to a decades-old treachery. Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective whose little gray cells unravel a web of lies, greed, and vengeance. Will he expose the killer before another strike? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie mystery where every detail matters and the truth is more shocking than you dare imagine. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ravenstone Manor. In the late autumn of 1938, the air in the English countryside carried a crispness that whispered of secrets buried beneath the frost. Ravenstone Manor, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in the heart of Sussex, stood as a monument to faded grandeur. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys loomed over the rolling hills, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. The manor had long been the seat of the Ashbourne family, a lineage as old as it was troubled. And on this particular November evening, it was to host a gathering that would alter its history forever. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion to Hercule Poirot, found himself seated in the plush interior of a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, the vehicle winding its way through the narrow lanes toward Ravenstone. The invitation had arrived at Poirot's London flat 3 days prior, penned in the elegant hand of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, the widowed matriarch of the family. It requested Poirot's presence at a weekend gathering to celebrate her 60th birthday, though the tone of the letter hinted at something more pressing than mere festivity. Hastings, ever eager for a glimpse into the lives of the aristocracy, had persuaded Poirot to accept, sensing an undercurrent of intrigue. "Mon ami," Poirot had said, adjusting his perfectly knotted tie as they prepared to depart. "This invitation, it is not merely a social call. The little gray cells, they tell me there is a puzzle waiting at Ravenstone, and where there is a puzzle, there is often a crime." The car pulled up to the manor's gravel drive just as dusk settled, casting long shadows across the lawn. The front doors, heavy oak carved with intricate motifs, swung open to reveal Lady Eleanor herself, a statuesque woman with silver hair pinned in an elegant chignon. Her emerald eyes, sharp and assessing, belied her age, and her smile, though warm, carried a trace of strain. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she greeted, her voice smooth as velvet. "I am delighted."
"It is I who am honored. The reputation of Ravenstone precedes it, and I am most curious to meet its inhabitants."
Hastings, less restrained, offered a hearty handshake.
"A splendid place, Lady Eleanor. Quite the setting for a celebration."
Her smile tightened.
Indeed. Come, let me introduce you to the others.
The drawing room was a study in opulence, its walls lined with crimson damask and its furniture polished to a mirror-like sheen. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering light over the assembled guests, each of whom turned to regard the newcomers with varying degrees of curiosity and wariness. Lady Eleanor made the introductions with practiced grace. First was Sir Reginald Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's eldest son, a man in his late 30s with a lean frame and a face marked by discontent. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his eyes darted restlessly as though searching for an escape. Beside him stood his wife, Clara, a striking woman with auburn hair and a cool, detached air. Her diamond necklace caught the firelight, drawing attention to her poised elegance. Next was Margaret Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's daughter, a pale, nervous woman of about 30, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Her husband, Dr. Henry Caldwell, a physician with a scholarly demeanor, hovered protectively at her side, his spectacles glinting as he nodded politely. Then there was Victor Langston, Lady Eleanor's nephew, a charming man in his mid-20s with a roguish grin and a reputation as a gambler. His companion, Miss Evelyn Ward, a budding actress with golden curls and a vivacious laugh, clung to his arm, her presence a splash of modernity in the staid room. Finally, there was Mr. Thomas Grayson, the family solicitor, a wiry man with thinning hair and a perpetually furrowed brow. He clutched a leather portfolio as though it were a shield, his eyes flicking nervously toward Lady Eleanor. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table groaned under the weight of silverware and crystal. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a claret that Poirot declared most satisfactory. But the conversation was strained. Sir Reginald spoke curtly of estate finances, Clara deflected questions about her recent trip to London, and Margaret's nervous laughter punctuated the silences. Victor, meanwhile, regaled the table with tales of Monte Carlo, though his anecdotes seemed to irritate Lady Eleanor. Hastings, ever observant of human nature, noted the undercurrents of tension.
A fine group,
He whispered to Poirot as they lingered over dessert.
but there's something off, don't you think? Like they're all hiding something.
Poirot's eyes gleamed.
Précisément, Hastings.
Shall uncover it. As the evening drew to a close, Lady Eleanor rose, her expression grave. "My friends," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation, "there is a matter I must address. Tomorrow, I intend to make an announcement regarding the future of Ravenstone. It is a decision that affects us all." A hush fell over the room. Sir Reginald's fork clattered against his plate, and Clara's hand tightened on her wine-glass. Margaret's eyes widened, and Victor's grin vanished. Grayson, the solicitor, cleared his throat, but said nothing. Later, as Poirot and Hastings retired to their rooms, the detective paused on the staircase, his hand resting on the polished banister. "Mon ami," he said softly, "this announcement, it is the key. Something tells me it will not be received with joy." Hastings frowned. "You think there's trouble brewing?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Trouble? Hastings? No. I think there is murder." The night passed uneventfully, or so it seemed. The manor was silent, save for the creak of ancient floorboards and the distant howl of wind across the downs. But as dawn broke, a scream shattered the stillness, echoing through the halls like a banshee's wail. Hastings bolted upright in bed, his heart pounding. He threw on his dressing gown and rushed into the corridor, where he found Poirot already emerging, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. "What was that?" Hastings demanded. Poirot's eyes were sharp as flint. "That, mon ami, was the sound of our puzzle beginning." They followed the sound to the library, where a grim scene awaited. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne lay slumped in a high-backed chair, her face frozen in a rictus of pain. A glass of brandy sat on the table beside her, its contents spilled across the polished wood. Her emerald eyes, so vibrant the night before, stared blankly into eternity. Margaret stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, her scream still lingering in the air. "She's dead!" she cried. "Mother is dead!" Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers probing gently. "Poison," he murmured, noting the faint blue tinge around Lady Eleanor's lips. "Administered, I suspect, in the brandy. But by whom and why?" Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The guests were summoned, and soon the library was filled with shocked faces and murmured denials. Sir Reginald's voice trembled as he demanded answers, while Clara's composure cracked, revealing the logic of my little gray cells. As the household dissolved into chaos, Hastings caught Poirot's eye. "You were right," he whispered. "Trouble indeed." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "And so, mon ami, the game begins." Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The library at Ravenstone Manor, once a sanctuary of leather-bound tomes and polished mahogany, now bore the grim weight of tragedy. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's body remained in the high-backed chair, her lifeless form casting a pall over the room. The morning light filtered through heavy drapes, illuminating motes of dust that danced like silent witnesses to the crime. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the acrid tang of spilled brandy, a grim reminder of the poison that had claimed the matriarch's life. Hercule Poirot stood near the body, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the chaos around him. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, darted from the overturned glass to the delicate blue tinge on Lady Eleanor's lips. Captain Hastings, at his side, struggled to maintain his composure as the household gathered, their faces a mosaic of shock, grief, and suspicion. Margaret Ashbourne, still trembling from her discovery, clung to her husband, Dr. Henry Caldwell, whose scholarly demeanor had given way to a strained pallor. "It's impossible," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mother was fine last night. Who could do such a thing?" Sir Reginald Ashbourne paced near the fireplace, his lean frame taut with agitation. "This is madness," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "Poison? In our home? It's an outrage." His wife, Clara, stood apart, her auburn hair catching the light as she stared at the floor, her expression unreadable. Victor Langston, the roguish nephew, leaned against a bookcase, his usual charm replaced by a nervous energy. His companion, Evelyn Ward, hovered nearby, her golden curls disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "We were all together last night. How could this happen?" Mr. Thomas Grayson, the solicitor, clutched his leather portfolio as though it were a lifeline, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. "We must call the police," he said, his voice clipped. "This is a matter for the authorities." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "The police, oui, they will be called," he said, his Belgian accent precise and measured. "But first, I, Hercule Poirot, must examine the scene. The truth, it lies in the details, and the details, they do not wait." Hastings, ever practical, glanced at Poirot. "Shouldn't we secure the room? Prevent anyone from tampering with evidence?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Bien pensé." Dr. Caldwell nodded, adjusting his spectacles as he approached the body. His hands, steady despite the circumstances, examined Lady Eleanor with clinical precision. "Poison, almost certainly," he said after a moment. "The cyanosis around the lips, the rigidity, it suggests a fast-acting toxin, possibly cyanide. The brandy glass is the likely vehicle." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the glass. Its contents had spilled across the table, staining the wood a deep amber. He leaned closer, his gloved fingers hovering over the rim. "The glass, it is not empty," he murmured. "A small amount remains. This we must preserve for analysis." He turned to the assembled group, his gaze sweeping over each face. "Tell me, who was the last to see Lady Eleanor alive?" A murmur rippled through the room. Sir Reginald stopped pacing, his eyes flashing. "We all saw her at dinner," he said. "She retired shortly after her announcement. I assume she went to bed." Clara's voice was cool, almost detached. "I saw her in the hall around 10 o'clock. She said she was going to the library to read. She often did that before bed." Margaret's hands twisted her handkerchief. "I didn't see her after dinner. Henry and I went to our room. I was tired." Victor shrugged, his grin absent. "Evelyn and I were in the billiard room until midnight. Didn't see Aunt Eleanor after she left the dining room." Grayson cleared his throat. "I spoke with Lady Eleanor briefly in her study at 9:30. She was reviewing some documents. She seemed preoccupied." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Preoccupied, you say? And these documents? What were they?" Grayson hesitated, his fingers tightening on his portfolio. "Estate matters. She was considering changes to her will." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Sir Reginald's face darkened, and Clara's hand froze mid-gesture. Margaret let out a small sob, while Victor's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Changes to the will," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but piercing. "And this, Monsieur Grayson, you did not mention earlier. Why?" Grayson flushed. "It was confidential. I am bound by professional duty." Poirot's smile was thin. "Duty, oui, but murder, it changes the rules. You will tell me more, later. For now, I must see the study." The study, adjacent to the library, was a smaller room, its walls lined with oak paneling and shelves of legal tomes. A desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkstand, and a silver letter opener. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, pausing on a small safe tucked beneath the desk. "This safe," he said. "It contains the will, n'est-ce pas?" Grayson nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but only a small gold locket around her neck, containing a faded photograph of a young man, presumably her late husband." Poirot's expression remained inscrutable as he pocketed the locket for further study. Returning to the library, Poirot began a meticulous examination of the scene. He noted the position of the brandy decanter on a sideboard, the distance between the chair and the door, and the faint scuff mark on the rug near the window. "Curieux," he murmured, kneeling to inspect the mark. "This rug, it has been disturbed. Perhaps someone stood here, watching." Hastings, hovering nearby, frowned. "Watching? You think the killer was in the room with her?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "Or perhaps they watched from outside. The window. It is not locked." A gasp came from Evelyn Ward. "The window? But it was so cold last night. Surely no one would—" Poirot's gaze was steady. "Mademoiselle, in murder, one does not assume. One observes." The police arrived shortly after, led by Inspector Davies, a gruff man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to Poirot's preliminary findings with a mixture of skepticism and respect, then set about securing the scene. "We'll need statements from everyone," he said, "and the brandy glass will go to the lab." Poirot nodded. "Bon, but I, Hercule Poirot, will conduct my own inquiries. The police, they are thorough, but they lack finesse." As the household dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, we have a puzzle of many pieces. The will, the key, the scuff mark, the brandy. These are not random. Each suspect, they have a motive. Sir Reginald, he is desperate for money. Clara, she hides something from her trip to London. Margaret, she is fragile, perhaps too fragile. Victor, he gambles, and debts make men desperate. Evelyn, she is ambitious, and ambition can be dangerous. And Grayson, he knows more than he says." Hastings frowned. "But how do we start? There's so much to unravel. Poirot's eyes twinkled. We start with the alibis, Hastings. Time. It is the skeleton key to any crime. We shall map their movements last night, and we shall find the contradiction. By midday, Poirot had interviewed each guest, noting their accounts with meticulous care. Sir Reginald claimed to have been in his study until midnight, reviewing accounts. Clara said she retired to her room after seeing Lady Eleanor in the hall. Margaret and Henry confirmed they were together in their room from 9 onward. Victor and Evelyn insisted they played billiards until midnight, then parted ways. Grayson said he went to bed after his meeting with Lady Eleanor. Poirot recorded each act. The guests avoided one another's eyes. Poirot, undeterred, continued his observations, noting the way Clara's fingers lingered on her necklace, the way Victor's laughter sounded forced, the way Grayson's portfolio never left his side. By evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Poirot stood alone in the library, his eyes fixed on the chair where Lady Eleanor had died. "The truth," he murmured. "It is here, waiting, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it." Hastings, watching from the doorway, felt a familiar thrill. The game was afoot, and the little Belgian detective was already one step ahead. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The atmosphere at Ravenstone Manor had thickened with suspicion by the time Hercule Poirot fully assumed command of the investigation. The police, under Inspector Davies, bustled about with their notebooks and measuring tapes. But it was Poirot's quiet presence that commanded the room. His small, immaculate figure moved with deliberate precision, his eyes like those of a hawk, missing nothing. The library, where Lady Eleanor Ashburn's body still lay under a sheet pending the coroner's arrival, was now a stage for his meticulous performance. Captain Hastings stood near the door, watching as Poirot circled the room, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. The detective's mustache twitched faintly, a sign Hastings knew well. The little gray cells were at work. "You're awfully calm about this, Poirot," Hastings remarked, his voice low. "A woman's been murdered and everyone's on edge, yet here you are, strolling about like it's a garden party." Poirot's eyes gleamed with a hint of amusement. "Mon ami, the calm, it is necessary. Panic obscures the truth, but order reveals it. The mind of Hercule Poirot, it is like a filing cabinet, each fact neatly placed, each contradiction noted. We shall see what this stage has to tell us." The household had been instructed to remain in the drawing room while Poirot conducted his initial examination. But their absence did not diminish the weight of their presence. Each suspect, Poirot knew, was a thread in the tapestry of this crime, and he intended to unravel it with care. He began with the brandy glass, now carefully bagged by the police, but not before Poirot had noted its position. "The glass, it was not knocked over in a struggle," he murmured. "It was placed, deliberately, to spill. This suggests control, not haste." Hastings frowned. "Control? You mean the killer window? It is unlatched. But the frost outside, it shows no footprints. Curious, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings peered out the window, the manicured lawn stretching into the misty distance. "Could someone have climbed in? There's a trellis just outside." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Possible, but unlikely. The trellis, it is old, fragile. A man of Victor's build, or even Sir Reginald, would break it. No, I think the window, it is a distraction. The truth lies elsewhere." He turned his attention to the desk where Lady Eleanor had sat. A single sheet of paper lay atop it, a letter addressed to Grayson, the solicitor, in her elegant hand. Poirot read it silently, his expression unreadable. "This letter," he said, "it requests a meeting tomorrow to discuss a matter of great urgency. The will, perhaps, or something more?" Hastings leaned over, reading the brief note. "It doesn't say much. Could it be a clue?" "Everything, mon ami, is a clue until proven otherwise," Poirot replied, tucking the letter into his pocket with a nod to Inspector Davies, who had just re-entered the room. "Inspector, you will ensure this is preserved, oui?" Davies, a man accustomed to straightforward crimes, grunted. "We'll handle it, Mr. Poirot. But I must say, this lot doesn't seem the murdering type. Old family, big house, probably just a tragic accident." Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. "An accident, Inspector? With cyanide? No, this is no accident. This is murder. And the murderer, they are clever. But not cleverer than Hercule Poirot." With the preliminary examination complete, Poirot requested permission to interview the household. Davies, somewhat reluctantly, agreed, provided his constable took notes. The drawing room where the suspects waited was a study in tension. Sir Reginald sat stiffly, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Clara, beside him, stared out the window, her face a mask of composure. Margaret clutched her handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed, while Dr. Caldwell murmured reassurances. Victor and Evelyn sat close together, their earlier vivacity replaced by strained silence. Grayson, as ever, clung to his portfolio, his eyes darting nervously. Poirot entered with a bow, his presence instantly commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "I regret the necessity of this intrusion, but a crime has been committed, and I, Hercule Poirot, must uncover the truth. I will speak with each of you in turn, and I tightened. Strained, if you must know. She controlled the estate, the money. I'm her heir, but she made it clear she could change her mind. That announcement last night, it was about the will, wasn't it?" Poirot noted the bitterness in his tone. "Perhaps. And where were you after dinner?" "In my study, working on accounts until midnight. Then I went to bed. Clara can confirm it." Clara, interviewed next, was poised but guarded. "I saw Eleanor at 10, as I said," she told Poirot, her voice cool. "I retired shortly after. Reginald was in his study when I went to bed. I heard him come in around midnight." Poirot's pencil moved swiftly in his notebook. "And your trip to London, madame? What was its purpose?" Her eyes flickered, but her smile remained. "Shopping, Mr. Poirot. A woman's prerogative." Margaret was next, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mother and I were close, but she was distant lately. I don't know why. Henry and I were in our room all evening. I was exhausted, and he was reading." Dr. Caldwell confirmed her account, adding, "I'm a light sleeper. If Margaret had left the room, I'd have known. As for Lady Eleanor, I hadn't seen her since dinner." Victor Langston, interviewed in the billiard room, was less forthcoming. "Look, I liked Aunt Eleanor, but she didn't approve of me," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Thought I was a wastrel. Maybe I am, but I didn't kill her. Evelyn and I were here until midnight, then I walked her to her room." Evelyn's account matched Victor's, though her nervousness was palpable.
I don't know anything about poisons, she insisted. I'm just an actress. Victor and I were together all evening. We didn't see anyone else. Grayson, the last to be questioned, was visibly uncomfortable. Lady Eleanor and I discussed the estate last night, he said, his voice tight. She was considering altering her will, but she didn't specify how. I left her in the study at 9:30 and went to bed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the key to the safe, monsieur? Where is it kept? Grayson hesitated. She wore it on a chain around her neck, always. Yet it is not there now, Poirot said softly. Most interesting. As the interviews concluded, Poirot gathered his notes, his mind racing. The alibis. They are too neat, he told Hastings. Each one supports another, yet the key is missing, and the window is unlatched. There is a pattern here, but it is obscured. Hastings frowned. You think they're lying? Not
In the hall, his eyes scanning the portraits of Ashbourne's past. This family, he murmured. They carry secrets like a burden. But I, Hercule Poirot, shall lift it. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a familiar surge of confidence. What's next, Poirot? The detective's smile was enigmatic. Next, mon ami, we watch. The guilty, they will betray themselves. They always do. As night fell over Ravenstone Manor, the air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. Somewhere within its walls, a murderer waited, unaware that Hercule Poirot was closing in. The morning after Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's murder cast Ravenstone Manor in a somber light. The November sun struggling to pierce the heavy mist that clung to the Sussex downs. Inside, the grandeur of the estate felt oppressive, its polished surfaces reflecting the unease of its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gloom, had taken residence in a small parlor adjacent to the library, transforming it into a makeshift headquarters for his investigation. A mahogany table served as his desk, littered with notes, a sketched floor plan of the manor, and a meticulously drawn timeline of the previous evening's events. Captain Hastings, ever his faithful shadow, stood by the window, watching the household move like pieces on a chessboard. Poirot, Hastings said, turning from the view. You've interviewed everyone, examined the scene and made your notes. Where do we go from here? The police seem convinced it's a straightforward case. Probably Sir Reginald, they say, given the will. Poirot's mustache twitched with disdain. The police, mon ami, they see only the surface. Sir Reginald, he is the obvious choice, oui. But the obvious is rarely the truth. The little gray cells, they tell me there is more to uncover. We must dig deeper into the minds of these people, their secrets, their contradictions. He tapped his notebook, where each suspect's alibi was recorded with precision. The alibis, they are too perfect, like a play rehearsed, but there is always a flaw, Hastings, always. Poirot's method was to begin with questions, not accusations. He requested the
Working on accounts, you say?
Yet the estate, it is in difficulty, n'est-ce pas? Lady Eleanor controlled the purse strings, and you, as her heir, stood to gain much. Or perhaps to lose, if her announcement was to change the will? Reginald's face flushed, his hands clenching. That's preposterous. Yes, the estate's been struggling. Debts from my father's time, bad investments. Mother was cautious, too cautious, but I didn't kill her. Poirot noted the tremor in his voice. And the key to the safe, monsieur? The one your mother wore? Did you ever see it? Reginald hesitated, his eyes flickering. She always wore it, a small silver key on a chain. I didn't see it last night, but I wasn't looking. Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. Merci. You may go. Clara Ashburn followed, her auburn hair swept into an elegant updo, her diamond necklace replaced by a simple pearl choker. She sat with the grace of a statue, her hands folded in her lap. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice cool. I have nothing to hide. I saw Eleanor at 10, as I told you, and went to bed. Reginald joined me around midnight. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes searching her face. Madame, your trip to London last week. You said it was for shopping, yet you returned with no purchases. Perhaps there was another purpose. A meeting, perhaps, with someone who might shed light on this tragedy. Clara's composure faltered for a fraction of a second, her fingers tightening. I don't know what you mean. I visited shops, saw friends. It was a personal matter. Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. Personal, oui. But in murder, madame, nothing is truly personal. If there is something you withhold, it is better to speak now. She met his gaze, her eyes defiant. I've told you all I know. Margaret Ashburn was next, her fragility more pronounced. Her handkerchief was a crumpled mess, and Dr. Caldwell accompanied her, his hand on her arm. Margaret's delicate, he said before Poirot could speak. This ordeal is too much for her. Poirot nodded courteously. I understand, doctor. Madame Caldwell, tell me of your mother's mood last night. Was she troubled? Did she speak of her announcement? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She was distant. She'd been that way for weeks. I thought it was the estate, the pressure. She mentioned the announcement at dinner, but nothing specific. I didn't press. Caldwell adjusted his spectacles. She seemed tired, but nothing alarming. If I'd suspected anything, I'd have acted. Victor Langston entered with a forced grin, his cigarette smoke curling in the air. Look, Poirot, I'm not your man, he said, sprawling in the chair. Aunt Eleanor and I didn't see eye to eye, but murder? That's not my style. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. Your style, monsieur, includes gambling, oui? Debts. They can drive a man to desperate acts. Did Lady Eleanor threaten to cut you off? Victor's grin faded. She wasn't thrilled about my habits, sure. But I wasn't in her will, so what's the motive? I was with Evelyn all evening, billiards, drinks, you know. And the key to the safe? Poirot asked. Did you ever see it? Victor shrugged. Saw it on her neck sometimes. Didn't think much of it. Evelyn Ward was nervous, her golden curls bouncing as she fidgeted. I don't know anything about keys or poison, she said, her voice high. Victor and I were together until midnight. I went to my room, and that's it. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, you are an actress, accustomed to playing roles. Is there a role you play here, perhaps, to protect someone?
Her eyes widened. No, I'm just here with Victor. I loved Lady Eleanor. She was kind to me. Finally, Thomas Grayson, the solicitor, entered, his portfolio still clutched tightly. Mr. Poirot, he said, his voice strained. I've told you what I know. Lady Eleanor and I discussed the estate. She was considering changes, but she didn't elaborate. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this safe, monsieur, if the key is missing, can it be opened? Grayson hesitated. There's a duplicate kept in my office in London, but only Lady Eleanor and I knew that. Poirot's pencil stopped. A duplicate? Most interesting. And where were you after your meeting with her? In my room, Grayson said quickly. I retired at 10. As the interviews concluded, Poirot sat back, his fingers steepled. The alibis, they hold for now, he told Hastings. But there is a crack somewhere. The key, the letter, the scuff mark, they point to something deliberate, calculated. Hastings frowned. What about the locket you found, the photograph inside? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The locket. It is personal, intimate. It may hold the secret of the heart. We must learn who this man was to Lady Eleanor. The day wore on, with Poirot moving between the library, study, and drawing room, his mind piecing together the puzzle. He examined the restless, the strain of suspicion fraying tempers. Sir Reginald snapped at a servant, Clara withdrew into silence, and Margaret's tears came in waves. Victor and Evelyn kept their distance, while Grayson hovered near the telephone, as if expecting a call that never came. Poirot, undeterred, gathered his notes. The picture begins to form, Hastings, he said. The killer, they are among us, and they are clever, but they have made a mistake, and I shall find it. As night fell, the manor seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move in Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The mist that shrouded Ravenstone Manor seemed to thicken with each passing hour, as though the very air conspired to obscure the truth. By the second day of the investigation, the household was a cauldron of suspicion, each glance laden with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm amid the storm, his meticulous nature undeterred by the growing tension. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, felt the weight of the case pressing upon him, the sheer complexity of motives and alibis threatening to overwhelm his straightforward mind. Poirot, Hastings said, as they stood in the parlor that served as Poirot's temporary office. The police are convinced it's Sir Reginald. He's the heir, he's in debt, and he was furious about his mother's announcement. It's all too neat, don't you think? Poirot's eyes gleamed with a knowing glint. Précisément, mon ami. It is too neat, too convenient. The obvious suspect, he is often the one placed before us to distract. The little gray cells, they tell me Sir Reginald is a red herring, a fish dangled to lure us from the true path. We must look beyond him to the shadows where the real murderer hides. The police, led by Inspector Davies, had indeed focused their attention on Sir Reginald Ashbourne. His financial troubles were well known, and a search of his study had revealed a ledger detailing the estate's mounting debts. Debts Lady Eleanor had refused to cover. Davies, with his practical approach, saw a clear motive. Reginald stood to inherit Ravenstone, and his mother's proposed changes to the will threatened his future. A heated argument overheard by a servant the previous week only strengthened the inspector's case. Poirot, however, was unconvinced. The motive, it is strong, oui, he told Hastings. But murder by poison requires patience, not passion. Sir Reginald, he is impulsive, a man of action. Cyanide, it is the weapon of a planner, someone who calculates. We must look elsewhere. To test his theory,
Poirot decided to observe the household under pressure. He requested a gathering in the drawing room, ostensibly to update the family on the investigation, but in truth, to watch their reactions. In a loose circle. Sir Reginald, his face flushed with indignation. Clara, her composure a fragile mask. Margaret, clutching her handkerchief. Dr. Caldwell, his scholarly air strained. Victor, his roguish charm dimmed. Evelyn, her eyes darting nervously. And Grayson, his portfolio a constant companion. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room. I have spoken with you all, and I have observed. The death of Lady Eleanor was no accident. It was murder, deliberate and cruel. The poison. It was administered in her brandy, but the question remains, by whom? I ask you now to consider your own actions last night. If there is something you have not shared, now is the time. A ripple of unease passed through the group. Sir Reginald leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. You're accusing us all, aren't you? I told you. I was in my study. The police are wasting time when they should be looking at, well, outsiders. Poirot's gaze was steady. Outsiders, monsieur. The window, it was unlatched, oui. But there are no footprints, no signs of intrusion. The killer, they are within these walls. Clara's voice was sharp. Then why focus on us? Anyone could have slipped into the library. A servant, perhaps. Poirot's mustache twitched. A servant, madam. Possible but unlikely. The servants, they were in their quarters by 9, as confirmed by the housekeeper. No, the answer lies with those who dined with Lady Eleanor last night. Margaret let out a sob, and Dr. Caldwell placed a protective arm around her. This is too much for my wife, he said. She's grieving. Surely you can see that. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. I see much, doctor. I see grief, yes, but also fear. Fear of what is hidden. Victor, leaning back in his chair, lit a cigarette. You're fishing, Poirot. You've got nothing but guesses. Evelyn and I were together, as we said. You're barking up the wrong tree. Evelyn nodded quickly. It's true. We were in the billiard room. We didn't see anything. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice tight. Mr. Poirot, I understand your need for thoroughness, but this speculation is distressing. Lady Eleanor's will, her announcement, it's all conjecture. Perhaps she was ill, and the brandy was merely a tragic mistake. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A mistake, Monsieur Grayson. With cyanide. No, this was no mistake. And the key to the safe, the one you say only you and Lady Eleanor knew of. Where is it now? Grayson's fingers tightened on his portfolio. I don't know. I told you she wore away. After the gathering, Poirot returned to the library, where the police had finished their initial sweep. He examined the brandy decanter again, noting its weight and the faint residue inside. The decanter. It was full yesterday, he murmured to Hastings. Yet now it is nearly empty. Someone poured from it after Lady Eleanor's death. Why? Hastings frowned. To cover their tracks? Or to make it look like she drank more than she did? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the room. He moved to the fireplace where the trace of ash he had collected the previous day still intrigued him. Kneeling, he sifted through the ashes, retrieving a small, charred fragment of paper. Mon Dieu, he whispered, holding it to the light. The fragment bore a single word. Trust. A clue? Hastings asked, leaning closer. A clue, oui. But to what? Poirot replied, slipping the fragment into an envelope. This paper. It was burned deliberately. Someone sought to destroy evidence, but they were careless. The day progressed with Poirot conducting discreet inquiries among the servants who confirmed the household's accounts but added small details. The butler, Mr. Simmons, recalled seeing Clara in the hall near the library at 10:15, slightly later than she had claimed. A maid, Jenny, mentioned hearing footsteps in the corridor near midnight, though she could not say whose. These inconsistencies, though minor, fueled Poirot's suspicions. By afternoon, Inspector Davies approached Poirot with a new development. "We've had the brandy glass analyzed," he said. "Cyanide, as expected. But there's something else, a fingerprint on the glass, clear as day. It's Sir Reginald's." Hastings' eyes widened. "That's damning, Poirot. His fingerprint on the murder weapon." Poirot's expression remained impassive. "A fingerprint, oui, but too convenient. Sir Reginald, he is not so careless as to leave such evidence, no. This is another red herring, placed to mislead. We must look at the others, their motives, their opportunities." That evening, as the household dined in strained silence, Poirot observed from the corner, his eyes missing nothing. Clara's hand trembled as she lifted her wineglass. Victor's laughter was forced, his eyes darting to Evelyn. Margaret avoided looking at the empty chair where her mother had sat, while Grayson's portfolio seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. After dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The fingerprint, it is a distraction, but it tells us something. The killer heart of this crime. Tomorrow, we shall set a trap to see who breaks." As the manor settled into an uneasy night, Poirot stood by his window, gazing into the mist. The red herrings were multiplying, but Hercule Poirot was not a man to be swayed by distractions. The truth, he knew, was close, waiting to be uncovered by his little gray cells. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The third day at Ravenstone Manor dawned with a chill that seeped into the bones, as if the house itself mourned Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's death. The mist outside had thickened, cloaking the Sussex Downs in a shroud that mirrored the mystery within. Hercule Poirot, ever precise, began the morning with a cup of tisane in the parlor he had claimed as his office, his notebook open before him. Captain Hastings, restless as ever, paced near the window, the weight of the investigation pressing on his soldierly instincts. "Poirot," Hastings said, pausing to glance at the detective, "we've got a fingerprint, a missing key, a burned paper, and a house full of suspects with alibis that don't quite add up. But it's all so vague. Where's the breakthrough?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Patience, mon ami. The breakthrough. It comes not in a thunderclap, but in a whisper. A single detail, overlooked by others, will unlock the truth. Today we seek that detail, and I believe it lies in the smallest of things, a gesture, a word, a moment." Poirot's focus turned to the minutiae of the crime scene, for he knew that in the smallest inconsistencies lay the greatest truths. He returned to the library, now cleared of Lady Eleanor's body, but still heavy with the memory of her death. The police, under Inspector Davies, had cordoned off the room, but Poirot's reputation secured him access. He moved with deliberate care, his gloved hands tracing the edges of the furniture, his eyes scanning every surface. The brandy glass, now in police custody, had yielded Sir Reginald's fingerprint, but Poirot dismissed it as a distraction. Instead, he focused on the decanter, which had intrigued him since the previous day. It stood on a silver tray on the sideboard, its crystal facets catching the weak morning light. Poirot lifted it, noting its weight. "Curieux," he murmured. The decanter. It was nearly full at dinner, yet now it is almost empty. Someone poured from it after Lady Eleanor's death. But why? Hastings frowned, peering at the decanter. To hide the poison, perhaps? Diluted? Too irregular. Perhaps a chair, dragged slightly, or a bag placed carelessly.
Hastings' eyes widened. A bag? You think someone brought something into the room?
Or took something out?
Poirot said, rising.
We must consider all possibilities.
His next stop was the fireplace, where the charred fragment bearing the word trust had been found. Poirot sifted through the ashes again, his fingers delicate as they uncovered another small piece of paper, this one bearing a partial date, 19. The rest was burned away, but the ink matched the first fragment.
Another piece of the puzzle,
Poirot said, slipping it into an envelope.
This paper. It was important enough to burn, yet not carefully enough to destroy completely.
Hastings, watching, felt a familiar frustration. But what does it mean, Poirot? Trust, a date, it's all so cryptic. Poirot's eyes gleamed.
Cryptic, oui, but not meaningless. The mind of the murderer. It betrays itself in these small acts of carelessness.
To test his growing suspicions, Poirot decided to probe the suspect's reactions to a specific detail: the missing key to the safe. He gathered the household in the drawing room once more, his demeanor calm but authoritative.
Mesdames et messieurs,
He began, standing before the fire.
a new fact has emerged. The key to Lady Eleanor's safe, which she wore on a chain, is missing. This key, it is vital to our inquiry. I ask you now, has anyone seen it, or know where it might be?
A murmur rippled through the group. Sir Reginald's face darkened. You're saying someone stole it? That's absurd. Mother never took it off. Clara's voice was cool. Perhaps it was misplaced. She was in the library late. She might have set it down. Margaret, pale and trembling, clutched her handkerchief. I never saw it. Mother was so private about such things. Victor, leaning against the mantel, smirked faintly.
Sounds like you're grasping at straws, Poirot. Maybe the key's still in the library, overlooked.
Evelyn nodded quickly. Yes, it could be under a chair or something. Grayson, his portfolio ever present, cleared his throat. As I said, there's a duplicate in my office. If the original is lost, we can use that. Poirot's gaze lingered on Grayson.
A duplicate, oui, but the original, it is significant. Its absence tells us much.
The group dispersed, but Poirot noted their reactions. Reginald's defensiveness, Clara's calculated calm, Margaret's genuine distress, Victor's forced nonchalance, Evelyn's nervous agreement, and Grayson's guarded precision. Each response was a brushstroke in the portrait of the crime.
Hastings frowned. But if the killer took it, why not use it? The safe's still locked. Précisément, Poirot said. That is the contradiction. The key was taken, yet the safe remains untouched. This suggests either haste or a deeper plan. To explore further, Poirot examined the locket found on Lady Eleanor's body. The photograph inside of a young man in military uniform was faded, but clear. This man, Poirot said, showing it to Hastings. He is not Lord Ashbourne, her late husband. The uniform, it is from the Great War, and Lord Ashbourne died before it began. Who, then, is this? Hastings studied the image. A lover? A brother?
It could be anyone. Not anyone, mon ami, Poirot replied. This locket, it was cherished, one close to her heart. It holds a secret, one that may have led to her death. By afternoon, Poirot turned his attention to the servants, whose observations often revealed what the family concealed. The housekeeper, Mrs. Bates, confirmed that the decanter had been full at dinner, as she had personally refilled it. But I didn't touch it after, she said, her voice firm, and no one else did as far as I know. The maid, Jenny, added a detail that caught Poirot's ear. I saw Miss Clara in the hall near the library at 10:15, sir. She was carrying a book, but she looked nervous, like she didn't want to be seen. Poirot's pencil moved swiftly. A book, you say? Did you see its title? Jenny shook her head. No, sir. It was dark, and she hurried away. This new information sent Poirot back to the library, where he searched the shelves for any book out of place. Near the window, he found a copy of Wuthering Heights, its spine slightly askew. Opening it, he discovered a folded piece of paper tucked inside. A note in Lady Eleanor's hand, dated the previous week. Meet me at 10 p.m. Trust is broken. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mon Dieu, Hastings, here is our detail. This note, it was meant for someone. The word trust. The burned paper, they are connected. Lady Eleanor arranged the meeting, and that meeting led to her death. Hastings' jaw dropped. But who is it for? And why hide it in a book? The book, it was a signal, Poirot said. Or perhaps a mistake. The killer, they did not expect it to be found. We must learn who met Lady Eleanor at 10. As evening fell, Poirot gathered his findings. The decanter's missing contents, the scuff mark, the burned paper, the locket, and now the note. Each was a thread, weaving a pattern only he could see. The killer, he told Hastings. They are clever, but they have underestimated.
The day at Ravenstone Manor brought a restless energy, as though the house itself sensed the tightening grip of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The mist outside had lifted slightly, revealing the stark outlines of the Sussex Downs, but within the manor's walls, the air remained heavy with secrets. Poirot, seated in his makeshift office in the parlor, pored over his notes, his small, precise hands arranging the clues like pieces of a mosaic. Captain Hastings, ever eager for action, stood by the fire, his impatience barely contained. Poirot, Hastings said, rubbing his hands together. That note you found, meet me at 10 p.m. Trust is broken. It's a bombshell. Lady Eleanor was expecting someone in the library. That's our killer, surely. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. Not so fast, mon ami. The note, it is significant, oui, but it raises more questions than answers. Who was to meet her? Why was trust broken? And why was the note hidden in a book, only to be left behind? The killer, they are clever, but their cleverness betrays them. The note, tucked inside Wuthering Heights, had set Poirot's mind racing. The word trust, echoed in the charred fragment from the fireplace, suggested a betrayal at the heart of the crime. The missing key to the safe, the locket with its mysterious photograph, and the emptied brandy decanter all pointed to a murderer who planned meticulously, yet left traces of their haste. Poirot's task now was to uncover the lies that cloaked the truth, and he knew the suspects were hiding more than they admitted. To probe deeper, Poirot decided to confront the household with the note, but indirectly, to observe their reactions. He gathered them in the drawing room, where the fire crackled with a false sense of warmth. The suspects sat in their usual places. Sir Reginald, his face taut with frustration. Clara, her composure brittle. Margaret, clutching her handkerchief. Dr. Caldwell, protective and alert. Victor, his roguish grin absent. Evelyn, her eyes darting nervously. And Grayson, his portfolio a constant shield. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. Progress has been made. A note, written by Lady Eleanor, has come to light. It speaks of a meeting at 10 o'clock on the night of her death, a meeting where trust is broken. I ask you now, did any of you meet with her in the library at that hour? A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. A note? That's nonsense. I was in my study, as I've said. I didn't see her after dinner. Clara's cigarette, his hands unsteady. Evelyn and I were in the billiard room. No meetings with Aunt Eleanor. Evelyn's agreement was quick, almost too quick. That's right, we were together. Grayson shifted uncomfortably, his portfolio creaking in his grip. I saw her at 9:30 in the study, as I told you. I didn't return to the library. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the tension in their postures, the fleeting glances exchanged. Very well, he said. But the note, it was hidden, and yet it was found. Someone was meant to see it, or not. It is a contradiction. As the group dispersed, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Did you see, mon ami? Clara's hands, they tightened when I mentioned the note. Victor's cigarette, it trembled. Grayson, he clutches that portfolio as if it holds his life. There are lies here, and they are beginning to unravel. To uncover more, Poirot turned to the servants, whose quiet observations often revealed what the family concealed. He summoned Jenny, the maid who had seen Clara in the hall at 10:15. In the privacy of the parlor, Jenny fidgeted, her apron twisted in her hands. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, sir, she said, but I heard something else that night. After I saw Miss Clara, I was cleaning the corridor near the library, and I heard voices. Low, like they didn't want to be heard. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Voices, mademoiselle. Whose? Jenny hesitated. I couldn't tell, sir. One was a woman's, sharp-like, and the other was a man's, but muffled. It was just after 10:15, maybe 10:20. Poirot's pencil moved swiftly. And what did they say? I couldn't make it out, sir. Something about promises, and too late. Then it went quiet. This new information sent Poirot back to the library, where he examined the area near the door. The heavy oak panels showed no signs of forced entry, but a faint scratch on the lock caught his eye. Curieux, he murmured, running a gloved finger over the mark. This lock, it has been tampered with, but not forced. A key, perhaps, or a tool. Hastings frowned. You think someone picked the lock? No, Poirot said. The scratch, it is superficial. It suggests an attempt, or perhaps a distraction. The killer. They wish us to look here, not elsewhere. Poirot's next move was to revisit the locket, which he had kept in his possession. The photograph of the young man in military uniform intrigued him. He summoned Mrs. Bates, the housekeeper, who had served the Ashbournes for 30 years. Showing her the photograph, he asked, This man, do you recognize him? Mrs. Bates studied the image, her face soft.
Speak of him often? Not often, sir. But when she did, it was with sadness. She said he was the only one she truly trusted. The word trust again. Poirot filed this away, his mind racing. The note, the burned paper, the locket, all pointed to a betrayal rooted in Lady Eleanor's past. But how did it connect to her death? By afternoon, another discovery emerged. The butler, Mr. Simmons, approached Poirot with a hesitant air. Sir, I found something in the study, behind the desk. I didn't want to bother the police, but you seem thorough. He handed Poirot a small, crumpled receipt, dated a week prior, from a London chemist. It listed a purchase of cyanide, marked as for industrial use. The buyer's name was illegible, smudged by water or ink. Poirot's heart quickened, though his face remained impassive. Merci, Monsieur Simmons. It is most important. Where exactly was it found? Under the rug, sir, near the safe. I was cleaning and noticed it. The receipt was a bombshell, but Poirot cautioned himself against haste. Cyanide, it is not easily obtained, he told Hastings. This purchase, it was deliberate.
But the smudged name, it is another attempt to obscure the truth. To test the suspects further, Poirot confronted Clara privately, showing her the receipt. "Madame," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "this was found in the study. A purchase of cyanide. Your trip to London last week. Did it involve a visit to a chemist?" Clara's face paled, her hands clenching. "That's absurd. I went shopping, as I said. I know nothing about cyanide." Poirot noted her reaction, his eyes never leaving her face. "Yet the maid saw you near the library at 10:15, madame, with a book. Was it Wuthering Heights? Did you place the note there?" Clara's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I told you I was in the hall briefly. I didn't go into the library. I didn't kill her." Poirot dismissed her, but not before noting the fear in her eyes. The lies were surfacing, like ripples on a pond disturbed by a stone. He turned to Hastings. "The receipt, the note, the voices in the library. These are the threads of a deeper betrayal. Lady Eleanor, she confronted someone that night, and it cost her life." As evening fell, the manor grew quieter, the suspects retreating to their rooms. Poirot stood in the study, staring at the safe. "The key," he murmured. "It is the heart of this. Whoever—"
The manor. The tension was palpable. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of order amidst chaos, sensed that the time had come to apply pressure, to force the hidden emotions of the suspects to the surface. Captain Hastings, standing by the parlor window, felt the strain of the investigation wearing on him, his soldierly resolve tested by the labyrinth of lies. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the view. "We've got the note, the receipt, the locket, and all these conflicting stories. But it's like chasing shadows. Someone's got to break soon, don't you think?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet confidence, his mustache twitching as he adjusted his perfectly knotted tie. "Précisément, mon ami. The heart, it is fragile, and under pressure it reveals what the mind conceals. Today we shall push, gently but firmly, and someone will crack. The truth, it is close." The discovery of the cyanide receipt and the note in Wuthering Heights had tightened the net around the suspects. But Poirot knew that logic alone would not suffice. The murder of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne was not merely a crime of calculation, but one of passion, rooted in betrayal. The word trust, echoed in the note and the burned fragment, pointed to a personal wound, and Poirot suspected that an emotional confrontation would expose the killer's vulnerability. He began the day by revisiting the study where the safe remained locked, its missing key a constant enigma. The receipt, found beneath the rug, suggested a deliberate act, but the smudged signature frustrated Poirot's need for precision. He examined the desk again, noting a faint ink stain on the blotter, as if a pen had been pressed too hard. "Curieux," he murmured, running a gloved finger over the mark. "Anger, perhaps, or haste. Someone wrote in this room under great strain." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "Could it be from the note? The one about the meeting?" "Possible," Poirot replied. "But the ink, it is different. This is fresher, more recent. Another secret, perhaps, written and destroyed." To test his theory, Poirot decided to confront the household with a calculated provocation. He gathered them in the drawing room, where the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the crimson walls. The suspects sat in their familiar places. Sir Reginald, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Clara, her composure fraying at the edges. Margaret, her eyes red from crying. Dr. Caldwell, protective but tense. Victor, his charm replaced by unease. Evelyn, fidgeting nervously, and Grayson, his portfolio a silent sentinel. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and commanding. "The investigation progresses, and the truth house points to premeditation, and the key to her safe, it is missing. I ask you now, not as suspects, but as human beings, What did Lady Eleanor know that led to her death? Who betrayed her trust? The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling like dust. Then, abruptly, Margaret let out a choked sob, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "Stop it," she cried, her voice raw. "You're tearing us apart. Mother!" She knew something, yes, but I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Dr. Caldwell reached for her, his face pale. "Margaret, darling, don't." "No," she interrupted, pulling away. "I can't keep quiet anymore. Mother was going to change the will, wasn't she? She told me last week she was worried about someone in this room. She said she'd been betrayed, but she wouldn't say who." The revelation hung in the air, a spark igniting the room's tension. Sir Reginald's face darkened, his hands clenching. "What are you implying, Margaret? That I'd kill her over money? That's monstrous." Clara's voice was sharp. "Margaret, you're upset. You don't know what you're saying." Victor's eyes narrowed, his cigarette forgotten. Aunt Eleanor was always dramatic. Maybe she was wrong about this betrayal. Evelyn, her voice trembling, added, "Maybe it was a misunderstanding. People say things they don't mean." Grayson, gripping his portfolio, cleared his throat. "Lady Eleanor was distressed, yes, but she didn't share details with me. I only knew of the will." Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting each reaction. Margaret's anguish, Reginald's fury, Clara's controlled panic, Victor's deflection, Evelyn's fear, Grayson's evasion. The crack he had hoped for had appeared, but it was Margaret's outburst that gave him pause. Her grief was genuine, but her words hinted at knowledge she had not yet fully revealed. After the gathering, Poirot took Margaret aside with Dr. Caldwell's reluctant permission. In the privacy of the parlor, her tears flowed freely. "Mr. Poirot," she whispered, "I didn't want to say it in front of them, but Mother told me something the day before she died. She said she'd discovered a secret, something that could ruin the family. She wouldn't tell me what, but she was afraid. She said she trusted no one, not even me." Poirot's eyes softened, but his mind was razor sharp. "Madam, this secret, did she give any hint? A name, a place?" Margaret shook her head. "Only that it was about the past, something from before I was born. She mentioned Edward, her brother. She said he'd warned her, years ago, about someone." The mention of Edward, the man in the locket, sent a jolt through Poirot. Her brother, oui. And this warning, what was it? "I don't know," Margaret's.
That's why she wrote the note. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. The locket, the note, the word, trust, all pointed to a betrayal rooted in Lady Eleanor's past, possibly linked to her brother Edward. But how did it connect to the present? To dig deeper, Poirot returned to the study, where he examined the locket again. The photograph, faded but clear, showed a young man with features strikingly similar to Lady Eleanor's. Mrs. Bates had confirmed he was Edward, killed in the Great War, but Margaret's words suggested his warning lingered, a shadow over the family. Poirot's next move was to confront Grayson, whose guarded demeanor and omnipresent portfolio had aroused his suspicions. In the study, Poirot showed him the locket. "Monsieur Grayson," he said, his voice firm, "this photograph, it is of Edward, Lady Eleanor's brother. Margaret says he warned her of a betrayal. As her solicitor, did she ever speak of this?" Grayson's face paled, his fingers tightening on his portfolio. "She mentioned Edward occasionally, but nothing specific. She was sentimental about him, that's all." "And the will?" Poirot pressed. "What changes was she planning?" Grayson hesitated, then sighed. "She wanted to redistribute the estate, to protect it from certain influences. She didn't name names, but she was adamant. I advised her to wait, to think it over." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the duplicate key to the safe, monsieur? Where is it now?" "In my office in London," Grayson said quickly. "I haven't touched it." Poirot dismissed him, but not before noting the sweat on his brow. The solicitor was hiding something, and Poirot intended to find out what. By evening, the manor was a tinderbox of emotions. Margaret's outburst had shaken the household, and whispers of betrayal circulated like wildfire. Clara avoided Reginald,
Victor kept his distance from Evelyn, and Grayson retreated to his room, his portfolio never leaving his side. Poirot, standing in the library, reviewed his findings. The note, the receipt, the locket, Margaret's revelation. "The past," he told Hastings. "It is the key. Edward's warning, Lady Eleanor's fear, it points to a secret buried long ago, but alive enough to kill for." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "What's next, Poirot? Another confrontation?" "No," Poirot said, his voice low. "Next we set a trap. The killer. They are nervous now. We shall give them a chance to act, and when they do, Hercule Poirot will be waiting." As night fell, the manor grew silent, but the air was charged with the promise of revelation. The emotional turning point had come, and Chapter 9. The Trap. The 6th day at Ravenstone Manor dawned with a deceptive calm, the pale November sun casting long shadows across the frost-kissed lawns. Within the manor's walls, however, the tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with each passing hour. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of precision, sensed that the moment had come to force the murderer's hand. His little gray cells, humming with activity, had woven the clues, note, receipt, locket, and Margaret's revelation into a pattern that pointed to a betrayal rooted in the past. Now he would set a trap to expose the killer's final misstep. Captain Hastings, standing by the parlor window, felt the weight of anticipation, his soldierly instincts braced for action. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the view. "Margaret's outburst yesterday shook them all. You've got them rattled, but how do we push them further? The police are still focused on Sir Reginald, and that fingerprint on the glass isn't helping his case." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with quiet resolve. "The fingerprint, mon ami. It is a distraction, as I have said. The police, they see the obvious, but the truth, it lies in the shadows. The killer, they are clever, but they are human, and humans, they err under pressure. Today we shall create that pressure, and watch who stumbles." Poirot's plan was simple, yet ingenious. He would announce that the missing key to the safe had been found, a lie designed to provoke a reaction. The key, still unaccounted for, was central to the mystery, and Poirot suspected the killer had taken it to conceal or access something in the safe. Perhaps the will, perhaps something more damning. By claiming it was in his possession, he hoped to flush the murderer out, forcing them to act in haste. He gathered the household in the drawing room at noon, the familiar setting now charged with unease. The fire crackled, but its warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion. Sir Reginald sat rigidly, his face a mask of defiance. Clara, beside him, maintained her brittle composure. Margaret, pale and fragile, clung to Dr. Caldwell's arm. Victor, his usual swagger subdued, lit a cigarette. Evelyn, her golden curls framing a nervous expression, stayed close to him, and Grayson, his portfolio ever present, watched Poirot with wary eyes. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, his small frame radiating authority. "A significant development has occurred. The key to Lady Eleanor's safe, which was missing from her person, has been recovered. It is now in my possession, and soon the contents of the safe will reveal the truth behind her death. I give you this warning. If there is something you wish to confess, now is the time, before the safe is opened." A ripple of shock passed through. Voice was sharp, almost too controlled. "If you have the key, Mr. Poirot, why not open the safe now? Why this theatrics?" Margaret let out a small gasp, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. "The safe. Mother's secrets. Oh, what does it mean?" Dr. Caldwell's scholarly demeanor faltered, his spectacles glinting as he leaned forward. "Are you certain, Mr. Poirot? The key was on a chain. How could it be found?" Victor exhaled a cloud of smoke, his grin forced. Nice try, Poirot. You're bluffing, aren't you? Trying to scare someone into talking. Evelyn's voice trembled. I don't know anything about a key. Victor, tell him we don't know. Grayson's fingers tightened on his portfolio, his face pale. If the key is found, then the will can be examined. But I assure you I know nothing of its whereabouts. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting each reaction. Reginald's alarm, Clara's calculated calm, Margaret's distress, Caldwell's unease, Victor's bravado, Evelyn's fear, Grayson's guarded tension. The key. It is safe, he said, his voice calm but unyielding. And tomorrow, the safe will be opened in the presence of Inspector Davies. I advise you to reflect on your actions. The group dispersed, their murmurs trailing like smoke. Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. Did you see, mon ami? The fear in their eyes? The killer. They are among them, and now they are nervous. Tonight, they will act, and we shall be ready. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. But what if they don't? What if no one takes the bait? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. They will, Hastings. The guilty, they cannot resist the lure of self-preservation. To prepare, Poirot enlisted the butler, Mr. Simmons, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Bates, to keep watch over the study and library that night. You will observe discreetly, he instructed, and report any movement. The killer, they may try to access the safe, believing the key is there. He also placed a small, innocuous object, a silver cigarette case, on the study desk, positioned so that any disturbance would be noticeable. A trap within a trap, he told Hastings. If the case is moved, we will know someone was there. As night fell, the manor grew silent, the tension palpable in the darkened corridors. Poirot and Hastings took turns keeping watch from a concealed alcove near the study, their eyes trained on the door. The hours ticked by, the grandfather clock in the hall chiming midnight, then 1, then 2. Just as Hastings began to doubt the plan, a faint creak echoed from the corridor.
Figure approached the desk, their hands fumbling with the cigarette case before moving to the safe. A faint metallic clink suggested an attempt to pick the lock. Poirot signaled to Hastings, and they stepped into the room, the light from a single lamp revealing the intruder, Clara Ashbourne. Her face pale, her hands clutching a small tool, she froze, her eyes wide with panic. "Madame," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "You are caught. Explain yourself." Clara's composure shattered, her voice trembling. I wasn't stealing. I needed to see the will. I had to know what she'd done." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The will, madame? Or something else? Why come in the night with a tool to open the safe?" Clara's hands shook, the tool clattering to the floor. "I didn't kill her, I swear it. But she knew something about me, something from London. I thought it might be in the safe." Hastings stepped forward, his voice stern. "What did she know, Mrs. Ashbourne? You'd better tell us." Clara sank into a chair, her face crumpling. "I met someone in London last week, a man. It was indiscreet. Eleanor found out, threatened to expose me unless I left Reginald. I couldn't let her ruin my life." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And this man, madame, who is he?" Clara hesitated, then whispered. "His name is Charles Wentworth. He's a businessman. I didn't tell you because it's irrelevant. I didn't kill her." Poirot noted her words, his mind racing. "We shall see, madame. For now you will return to your room, and you will speak of this to no one." As Clara left, trembling, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Do you believe her? This Wentworth fellow, could he be involved?"
Possible, Poirot said, examining the cigarette case, now slightly askew. But her story, it is only part of the truth. The safe, it holds the key, literal and figurative. We must open it. The next morning, Poirot arranged for Grayson to retrieve the duplicate key from London under police supervision. The trap had worked, exposing Clara's secret, but Poirot knew the real killer was still at large. The locket, the note, the receipt, all pointed to a deeper betrayal, one Clara's indiscretion might only peripherally touch. As the manor stirred, Poirot stood in the study, his eyes fixed on the safe. "The truth, mon ami," he told Hastings. "It is within our grasp. The safe will speak, and the murderer will have nowhere to hide." The stage was set, and Hercule Poirot was ready for the final act. The seventh day at Ravensden he had set the previous night. Catching Clara Ashbourne in the study had exposed a crack in the facade, but it was the safe and its contents that held the key to Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's murder. Captain Hastings, standing in the parlor that served as Poirot's headquarters, felt the weight of the impending revelation, his heart racing with anticipation. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "Clara's confession last night was a shock, but you don't think she's the killer, do you? She seemed desperate, not murderous. And what about that safe? Will it really tell us who did it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with quiet confidence. "Mon ami, Clara's indiscretion. It is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. The safe, it holds the truth, and today we shall open it. The murderer, they have woven a clever web, but they have underestimated Hercule Poirot, the little gray cells. They see through the lies." The duplicate key to the safe, retrieved from Grayson's London office under police supervision, had arrived that morning. Poirot, accompanied by Inspector Davies, Hastings, and a visibly nervous Thomas Grayson, gathered in the study at noon. The household was summoned to the drawing room, where they waited under the watchful eye of a constable, their faces a study in dread and curiosity. The safe, tucked beneath the desk, loomed like a silent sentinel, its contents the final piece of the mystery. Poirot knelt before the safe, the small silver key gleaming in his gloved hand. "Now," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "we shall see what Lady Eleanor sought to protect, or to hide." He inserted the key, turned it with a soft click, and opened the door. Inside was a single envelope, sealed with red wax, bearing Lady Eleanor's initials. Poirot broke the seal and withdrew a document, his eyes scanning the pages with meticulous care. "It is the will," he announced, his voice carrying a note of triumph. "But it is not the will Grayson expected. This is a new draft, dated 1 week ago. Lady Eleanor, she intended to change everything." Grayson, clutching his portfolio, stepped forward, his face pale. "A new will? But she didn't tell me." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "No, monsieur, she did not. And that, it is significant." He turned to Hastings and Davies. "The will, it leaves the bulk of the estate to a trust for charitable causes." "The locket? But it's just a photograph of Edward." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Non, mon ami. It is more than that. The locket, it is a clue,
but we must return to the drawing room to reveal all. The household was assembled, their faces tense as Poirot entered, the will and letter in hand. Inspector Davies stood by the door, his constable ready to act. Poirot took his place before the fireplace, his small frame radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the time has come to unmask the murderer of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne. The clues they have spoken, and the truth, it is clear." He held up the letter. Lady Eleanor knew of a betrayal, one rooted in her past, linked to her brother Edward. She wrote a note arranging a meeting at 10 o'clock to confront this betrayer. That meeting led to her death by cyanide in her brandy. The key to her safe was taken, the decanter emptied, a paper burned, all to hide the truth. But the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot. He turned to Clara. "Madame Ashbourne, you were seen near the library at 10:15 with a book. You admitted to a secret in London, a meeting with Charles Wentworth. But this, it is not the whole story, is it?" Clara's face paled, her hands trembling. "I told you I didn't kill her. I was protecting myself." Poirot nodded, then turned to Victor. "Monsieur Langston, your debts, they are great, and Lady Eleanor disapproved. You are in the billiard room, you say, but the maid heard voices in the library, voices speaking of promises and betrayal." Victor's grin faltered. "I was with Evelyn. I didn't go near the library." Poirot's gaze shifted to Grayson. "And you, Monsieur Grayson, you knew of the will's changes, yet you kept silent. Your portfolio, it never leaves your side. Why?" Grayson's voice was strained. "It's my work. I have nothing to hide." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, monsieur. You have everything to hide. The locket, it holds the key, the photograph of Edward. It is not just a memory. Inside there is an inscription, overlooked until now." He produced the locket, opening it to reveal a tiny engraving on the back. "To E from T, 1914. Poirot's voice was steady. "Edward's warning. It was about you, Thomas Grayson. You were his friend, his confidant, but you betrayed him. You forged documents to swindle the Ashbourne estate during the war, and Edward discovered it. He died before he could expose you, but Lady Eleanor, she learned the truth." Grayson's face drained of color, his portfolio slipping to the floor. That's preposterous. I was her solicitor."
The decanter, to obscure the poison's source, left Sir Reginald's fingerprint to mislead, and scratched the lock to suggest an outsider. But you could not destroy the locket, nor the will, which exposed your motive. The room was silent, all eyes on Grayson. He stammered. "You have no proof." Poirot held up the receipt. "This, found in the study, bears traces of your ink, the same as your portfolio's pen. The police will confirm it. You bought the cyanide, knowing Lady Eleanor's habits. You killed her to protect your secret." Grayson collapsed into a chair, his face crumpling. "She was going to ruin me. I had no choice." Inspector Davies stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Thomas Grayson, you're under arrest." As Grayson was led away, the household sat in stunned silence. Margaret wept. Reginald stared blankly, and Clara's composure finally broke. Victor and Evelyn clung to each other, their relief palpable. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "The truth, mon ami, it is always there, in the details." The manor seemed to exhale. The weight of the crime lifted at last. But Poirot's work was not yet done. There was one final chapter to write. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The revelation of Thomas Grayson's guilt had lifted the oppressive shroud that hung over Ravenstone Manor.
yet the air remained heavy with the aftermath of betrayal. The seventh day, now drawing to a close, saw the Sussex Downs bathed in the soft glow of a setting November sun, its light filtering through the manor's windows like a tentative promise of peace. Hercule Poirot, his task of unmasking the murderer complete, stood in the parlor he had used as his headquarters, his small, immaculate figure a study in quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, seated by the fire, felt the weight of the case settle into a bittersweet resolution, his mind still reeling from the dramatic confrontation in the drawing room. "Poirot," Hastings said, leaning forward, "you were magnificent back there. The way you pieced it all together, the locket, the note, the receipt. It was like watching a maestro conduct a symphony. But how did you know it was Grayson? He seemed so unassuming." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with the calm certainty of a man who had mastered his craft. "Mon ami, the truth, it is always in the details. Grayson, he was unassuming, oui, but that was his strength. The quiet ones, they are often the most dangerous, for they hide their motives behind a mask of ordinariness. The little gray cells, they saw through his facade, and the clues, they spoke the truth." Poirot moved to them, but Poirot seemed unaffected, his scarf neatly arranged, his hat tilted at a precise angle. As they walked, he began to reflect, his voice measured and deliberate, weaving the threads of the case into a coherent tapestry. "The murder of Lady Eleanor," he said. "It was a crime of the past, dressed in the clothes of the present. The locket with his photograph of Edward and the inscription to E from T, 1914, was the first clue. It was not merely a keepsake, but a reminder of a bond and a betrayal. Edward, her brother, had warned her of a man who sought to harm the family. That man was Thomas Grayson, his friend, who forged documents during the war to siphon funds from the Ashbourne estate. Edward discovered this, but died before he could act." Hastings nodded, his breath visible in the cold air. "And Lady Eleanor found out somehow?" "Oui," Poirot said, pausing to inspect a rose. "She found Edward's diary, hidden in the safe, detailing Grayson's treachery. This diary, it was the reason for her announcement, her decision to change the will. She intended to protect the estate from Grayson's influence, perhaps to expose him. But Grayson, he learned of her discovery, perhaps through an indiscreet word, perhaps by spying on her meetings with Grayson in the study. They turned down a path lined with bare yews, the manor looming behind them. "The note in Wuthering Heights," Poirot continued. "It was her summons to Grayson, a confrontation at 10 o'clock. 'Trust is broken,' she wrote, echoing Edward's warning. Grayson, he came to the library, and there he poisoned her brandy with cyanide, purchased in London under a false name. The receipt, smudged but traceable to his ink, was his first mistake." Hastings frowned, kicking a pebble. "But the key to the safe, why take it if he didn't open it?" "A clever distraction," Poirot said. "Grayson took the key to make it seem the will was the motive, pointing suspicion at Sir Reginald, whose debts made him an easy target. He burned pages of the diary to destroy evidence, but left a fragment, trust, in his haste. The decanter, emptied after the murder, was to obscure how much brandy was poured, ensuring the poison's strength was not questioned. The scuff mark on the rug, it was from his briefcase, dragged as he stood by the window, planning his escape. "And the fingerprint?" Hastings asked. "Sir Reginald's on the glass?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. Another of Grayson's tricks. He placed the glass in Reginald's study, knowing it would be handled. The police, they saw the obvious, but I, Hercule Poirot, saw the manipulation, outburst, Victor's debts, Evelyn's nervousness. They were threads in the web, but Grayson, he was the spider. Hastings sat on the bench, his mind racing. And the trap, you said? With the key? That was brilliant. It forced Clara to act, but it also made Grayson nervous, didn't it? Oui, Poirot said, sitting beside him. The announcement that the key was found, it was a spark to ignite their fears. Clara's attempt to open the safe revealed her desperation, but Grayson's silence, his guarded demeanor, confirmed his guilt. When we opened the safe, the will and letter sealed his fate. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You make it sound so simple, Poirot. But it was anything but. Poirot's smile was modest, though his eyes betrayed his pride. Simplicity, mon ami, is the hallmark of truth. The murderer, they complicate, they obscure. But the truth, it is always clear if one looks with the eyes of logic and the heart of understanding. They rose, walking back toward the manor. The household, now freed from the shadow of suspicion, was beginning to heal. Sir Reginald, though shaken, had vowed to honor his mother's charitable wishes. Margaret, supported by Dr. Caldwell, was finding solace in her grief. Victor and Evelyn, their futures uncertain, spoke of leaving Ravenstone to start anew. Clara, her secret exposed, faced a strained marriage, but a chance for redemption. As they reached the manor steps, Poirot paused, his gaze distant. This case, Hastings, it reminds us that trust, it is fragile. Lady Eleanor, she trusted Grayson, as she trusted her brother. Her death, it was the price of that trust betrayed, but justice, it restores balance. Hastings nodded, his voice soft. You restored that balance, Poirot. You always do. Poirot inclined his head, his hat casting a shadow in the fading light. It is my purpose, mon ami, to bring order where there is chaos, to shine light where there is darkness. They entered the manor where Inspector Davies awaited to finalize the paperwork. Grayson, now in custody, had confessed fully, his composure shattered by the weight of his crimes. The police, initially skeptical of Poirot's methods, now offered grudging respect. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, the detective took one last look at the drawing room where the drama had unfolded. Ravenstone Manor, he murmured. It will heal, but it will never forget. The Rolls-Royce awaited to carry them back to London, the case closed, the puzzle solved. Poirot settled into the plush seat, his hands folded neatly. Onward, Hastings, he said, his voice light. There are always more puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is always ready.
The aftermath. The 8th day at Ravenstone Manor unfolded with a quiet solemnity, as if the estate itself exhaled after the storm of revelation. The November sky was clear, the Sussex Downs stretching beneath a pale sun that offered little warmth, but a promise of renewal. The arrest of Thomas Grayson had lifted the veil of suspicion, yet the scars of betrayal lingered in the faces of those left behind. Hercule Poirot, his mission to unmask the murderer complete, prepared to depart, but not before ensuring that every thread of the mystery was neatly tied. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood in the entrance hall, his suitcase packed, his mind still grappling with the intricacies of the case. Poirot, Hastings said, adjusting his hat. You've done it again. Grayson's confession, the will, the locket, it all came together like clockwork. But I can't help feeling for this family. They're free of the murderer, but the wounds, they'll take time to heal. Poirot,
impeccable in his tailored coat and polished shoes, nodded thoughtfully, his mustache twitching faintly. Oui, mon ami. The wounds of betrayal, they cut deep. But time, it is a gentle healer. And truth, it is the balm. The Ashbournes, they will rebuild, for they have no choice but to face the light of day. The morning was spent finalizing details with Inspector Davies, who, despite his initial skepticism, now regarded Poirot with a grudging admiration. "You've got a knack for this, Mr. Poirot," he said, handing over the final report. "Grayson's confessed to everything, forging documents in 14, stealing from the estate, poisoning Lady Eleanor to keep it quiet. That diary you mentioned, we found the rest of it in his room, hidden in a false bottom drawer." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Boom, the diary. It was the heart of the matter. Edward's words, they haunted Grayson, and Lady Eleanor's discovery of them sealed her fate. The little gray cells, they saw the pattern. The household gathered in the drawing room one final time, not for confrontation, but for closure. Sir Reginald, his face etched with a mixture of relief and shame, stood by the fireplace, his usual bluster subdued. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice low, "I was wrong to doubt you. Mother's will, it's not what I expected, but I'll honor it. The estate will go to her charities."
See things differently. Evelyn's smile was tentative but genuine. "We'll make it work. Somehow." Poirot, standing before them, inclined his head. "Mesdames et messieurs, the tragedy of Lady Eleanor. It is a lesson in trust and its fragility. She sought to protect you, even in her final act. Honor her by living truthfully." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the room where so much had unfolded. The crimson damask walls, the polished furniture, the crackling fire, all seemed quieter now, as if the manor itself acknowledged the resolution. He turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "The human heart, mon ami, it is complex. Grayson's greed, it was born of opportunity, but his fear, it was born of guilt. Lady Eleanor, she saw through him, and for that she paid the ultimate price." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the locket, the note, the burned fragment. "That word, trust," he said. "It was everywhere. In the note, the diary, even her brother's warning. It's haunting, isn't it?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his gaze distant. "Trust. It is the foundation of all things, yet so easily broken. Lady Eleanor trusted Grayson as she trusted her family, but in the end it was her trust in Edward's memory that led us to the truth." They walked to the library where the scene of the crime had played out. The brandy decanter, now empty, stood on the sideboard, a silent witness to the murder. The rug, with its faint scuff mark, lay undisturbed. The safe, its contents revealed, was closed once more, its secrets laid bare. Poirot paused by the high-backed chair where Lady Eleanor had died, his hand resting lightly on its arm. "This chair," he said. "It was a throne, a place of reflection. Here, she faced her betrayer, and here, she left us the clues to find him. The locket, the note, the receipt, all were her voice, speaking from beyond." Hastings, moved by the solemnity of the moment, cleared his throat. "What now, Poirot? Back to London?" Poirot's smile was faint but warm. "Oui, Hastings, but first, a moment to reflect. The case, it is closed, but the lesson, it lingers. We must always seek the truth, no matter how painful, for it is the only path to justice. They left the library, their footsteps echoing in the silent hall. The servants, led by Mr. Simmons and Mrs. Bates, offered quiet thanks as they passed, their relief palpable. The Rolls-Royce awaited outside, its engine purring softly, ready to carry them back to the bustle of London. Poirot settled into the plush seat, his hands folded neatly, his mind already turning to new puzzles. As the car wound through the Sussex lanes, Hastings
Connect. They deduce. And always they seek the truth, no matter how deeply it is hidden. The manor receded into the distance, its ivy-clad walls a testament to its enduring secrets. The Ashbournes would rebuild, their lives forever changed by the truth Poirot had uncovered. As the car sped toward London, the detective leaned back, his thoughts drifting to the philosophy that guided him.
Life, Hastings,
He said softly.
it is a puzzle, and we are all players. But with order, with logic, we can find our way. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall always be here to light the path.
The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the downs in shadow, and Ravenstone Manor faded into memory, its story complete, its justice served. Chapter 13. The Unseen Threads. The 9th day at Ravenstone Manor found the estate bathed in a fragile stillness, as though the resolution of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's murder had left it both cleansed and hollow. The November air was crisp, the Sussex Downs stretching under a sky streaked with clouds, their edges tinged with the gold of a reluctant sun. Hercule Poirot, his work in unmasking Thomas Grayson complete, lingered at the manor to ensure no loose ends remained. Captain Hastings, ever his steadfast companion, stood in the entrance hall, his suitcase at his feet, his mind still entangled in the intricacies of the case. "Poirot," Hastings said, adjusting his scarf against the morning chill. "You've solved the murder. Grayson's confessed, and the family's trying to move on, but I can't shake the feeling we've missed something. All those clues, the locket, the note, the receipt, they fit so perfectly. Yet there's a shadow, isn't there?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Mon ami, you are learning. Oui, there is always a shadow. A thread left unwoven. The case, it is solved, but the human heart, it holds secrets beyond the crime. Today, we shall tie these threads, for Hercule Poirot leaves no puzzle incomplete." Though Grayson's confession had closed the case, Poirot's methodical nature demanded a final review, a chance to ensure no detail had been overlooked. He began in the parlor, his notes spread across the mahogany table, each clue meticulously catalogued. The locket with Edward's photograph, the note in Wuthering Heights, the cyanide receipt, the burned fragment, the scuff mark, the empty palpable, his betrayal a wound still fresh. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but authoritative, "the murderer has been found, and justice will be served. But there are threads yet to weave, questions that linger. Lady Eleanor's death, it was not only about Grayson's greed, but about the past that shaped it. I ask you now for her memory, to share any final truths." A hush fell, the group exchanging glances. Clara spoke first, her voice soft but clear. "Mr. Poirot, you were right about Charles Wentworth. I met him in London, and Eleanor knew.
She threatened to expose me, but I think she was trying to protect me, not ruin me. I was too afraid to see it. Poirot nodded, his eyes gentle. Fear, madame, it blinds us. But your honesty, it honors her. Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. Mother mentioned Edward often in her last weeks. She said his death broke her heart, but also his warning. I think she suspected Grayson for years, but couldn't believe it until she found the diary. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his spectacles, his tone thoughtful. As a physician, I should have noticed her distress. She was tired, distracted, but I thought it was age. I failed her. Victor, his cigarette unlit, cleared his throat. Aunt Eleanor never liked me much, but she gave me chances. I didn't know about Grayson's past, but I heard them arguing last month, something about money and trust. I should have said something. Evelyn's eyes were wide. I was just a guest here, Mr. Poirot, but Lady Eleanor was kind. If I'd known anything, I'd have told you. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, his mind sifting their words. Merci, he said. Your candor, it completes the picture. Lady Eleanor, she sought to protect you all, even as she faced her betrayer. After the meeting, Poirot returned to the study, where the safe stood as a silent reminder of the truth it had held. He examined the diary pages, recovered from Grayson's room, their faded ink detailing a betrayal from 1914. Edward had discovered Grayson's forgery, threatening to expose him. But the war claimed Edward before he could act. Lady Eleanor, finding the diary decades later, had pieced together the truth, prompting her to rewrite the will and confront Grayson. Poirot turned to Hastings, who had followed him. The diary, mon ami, it was the spark. But there is one final thread, Clara's connection to Wentworth. I suspect he is not merely a lover, but is the unseen thread. Grayson, he manipulated not only Lady Eleanor but Clara, weaving a web to protect his secrets. Wentworth, he was a pawn, but a dangerous one. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You saw it all, Poirot, even the things we didn't know to look for. Poirot's smile was modest. The little gray cells, they see what others miss. But it is the heart, Hastings, that guides them. Lady Eleanor's trust, it was her strength and her downfall. As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave. The household gathered to bid them farewell, their gratitude tempered by sorrow. Sir Reginald shook Poirot's hand, his grip firm. You've saved us in a way, he said. Mother would be grateful. Margaret, tears in her eyes, added, You gave us the truth, Mr. Poirot. It's painful, but it's hers. Poirot inclined his head, his hat in hand. It is my duty to seek the truth and restore order. Ravenstone, it will heal, and you will carry her legacy. The Rolls-Royce awaited, its engine a soft hum in the quiet dusk. As they drove away, the manor receded, its ivy-clad walls a testament to its enduring strength. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who sat with his hands folded, his eyes distant. What now, Poirot? Hastings asked. Another case? Another puzzle? Poirot's voice was soft, reflective. Always, mon ami. The world, it is full of puzzles, and I, Hercule Poirot, am called to solve them. But for now, we return to London, to rest, to reflect, until the next challenge calls. The car wound through the Sussex lanes, the downs fading into twilight. Ravenstone Manor stood as a monument to a tragedy resolved, its secrets laid bare by the relentless logic of Poirot's little gray cells. The case was closed, but its echoes would linger, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the power of truth. Chapter 14. The Legacy of Ravenstone. The 10th day at Ravenstone Manor dawned with a serene clarity, the November sun casting a gentle glow over the Sussex Downs, as if nature itself acknowledged the resolution of the tragedy within. The manor, though still marked by the shadow of Lady Eleanor Ashburn's murder, seemed to breathe easier, its halls quieter, its atmosphere softened by the truth Hercule Poirot had uncovered. The Belgian detective, his task nearly complete, prepared to depart, but not before ensuring that the legacy of the Ashburn family was secured. Captain Hastings, standing in the entrance hall with his coat draped over his arm, felt a mix of relief and melancholy, the weight of the case giving way to a sense of closure. "Poirot," Hastings said, glancing at his friend, "you've tied up every loose end. Grayson's confession, Clara's secret, the diary. It's
his mustache twitching faintly. Mon ami, the truth, it is a double-edged sword. It cuts away the lies, but it leaves scars. The Ashbournes, they have the truth now, and with it, the chance to rebuild. Ravenstone, it is more than a house. It is a legacy. And I, Hercule Poirot, have ensured it will endure." The morning was spent in final discussions with Inspector Davies, who had returned to the manor to wrap up the formalities. Grayson, now in custody in London, had provided a detailed confession, corroborating Poirot's deductions. The diary, recovered from his room, revealed the full extent of his wartime forgery, a scheme that had siphoned thousands from the Ashbourne estate under the guise of legitimate investments. Edward's discovery of the fraud had threatened Grayson's position, and though the war claimed Edward, Lady Eleanor's recent discovery of the diary had reignited the danger, leading to her murder. "The diary," Poirot told Hastings as they reviewed the case in the parlor. "It was the key to Grayson's fear. Lady Eleanor, she was not content to let the past lie. Her announcement, her new will, it was her way of protecting her family from his influence, even at the cost of her life." Hastings frowned, his mind lingering on the locket. "And the locket, Poirot? That inscription? 2E from T, 1914? It was so personal. Did Grayson know it pointed to him?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "The locket, it was Lady Eleanor's talisman, a reminder of her brother's warning. Grayson, he knew its significance, but he could not remove it without drawing attention. His mistake was underestimating her resolve, and mine." To ensure no further secrets lingered, Poirot requested a final meeting with the household, not to accuse, but to solidify their path forward. The drawing room, its crimson walls warmed by the morning light, felt less oppressive now, the fire burning steadily as the family gathered. Sir Reginald stood tall, his usual agitation replaced by a quiet determination. Clara, her face softer, sat beside him, their hands touching lightly. Margaret, steadied by Dr. Caldwell, offered a tentative smile. Victor and Evelyn, their plans to depart for London firm, stood together, their youth a contrast to the manor's ancient weight. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "the tragedy of Lady Eleanor's death has been resolved, and the guilty has been brought to justice. But her legacy, it lives in you. Her will, it directs the estate." Nodded, her eyes meeting Poirot's. "I was wrong to hide my mistakes. Eleanor knew, and she tried to guide me. Reginald and I will rebuild, together." Margaret's voice was soft, but firm. "Mother loved Ravenstone, but she loved us more.
I'll help with the charities, Mr. Poirot. It's what she'd want. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his spectacles, his tone warm. We'll support Margaret and the family. Ravenstone will be a place of healing. Victor, his cigarette unlit, grinned faintly. I'm done running, Poirot. Evelyn and I are starting fresh. No more debts, no more schemes. Aunt Eleanor's death. It woke me up. Evelyn squeezed his hand, her smile genuine. We'll make it, thanks to you. Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. You are the legacy of Lady Eleanor, and through you, her spirit endures. Trust, it was her gift and her burden. Guard it well. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the room. The portraits of Ashbourne's past seemed to watch, their stern faces softened by the resolution of the truth. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. The family, they are not without flaws, but they are human. Lady Eleanor, she saw their potential, even in their weaknesses. Her death, it was a tragedy, but it has forged them anew. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful. You've done more than solve a crime, Poirot. You've given them a future. They walked to the library, where the high-backed chair stood empty, a silent monument to Lady Eleanor's final moments. Poirot paused, his hand resting on the armrest. Here, he said. She faced her betrayer, armed only with courage and truth. The locket, the note, the diary. They were her weapons, and they led us to justice. Hastings glanced at the sideboard where the brandy decanter had stood. It's strange, isn't it? So much hinged on such small things. A glass, a key, a word. Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. The smallest things, they carry the greatest weight. The little gray cells, they see what others overlook, and in that, they find the truth. As they prepared to leave, the servants gathered to bid them farewell. Mrs. Bates, the housekeeper, offered a tearful thanks, her voice trembling. You've saved Ravenstone, sir. Lady Eleanor would be grateful. Mr. Simmons, the butler, added, We'll keep her memory alive, Mr. Poirot. The manor stronger for it. The Rolls-Royce awaited, its polished exterior gleaming in the sunlight. Poirot settled into the seat, his hand
Unraveler. As the car pulled away, Ravenstone Manor receded into the distance, its ivy-clad walls standing firm against the passage of time. The Ashbournes, united by grief and truth, would carry on, their legacy shaped by the woman who had loved them and the detective who had saved them. The road to London stretched ahead, and Poirot, ever vigilant, prepared for the next puzzle, his little gray cells ready for whatever lay beyond the horizon. Chapter 15. The Final Key. The 11th day at Ravenstone Manor marked the end of Hercule Poirot's sojourn, the Sussex estate standing resolute under a sky now clear of the November mists that had cloaked it during the investigation. The manor's ivy-clad walls, bathed in the soft light of a late autumn sun, seemed to exhale a final sigh of relief, as if acknowledging the closure brought by the unmasking of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's murderer. Poirot, his mission fulfilled, stood in the entrance hall, his suitcase packed, his immaculate appearance a testament to his unyielding order. Captain Hastings, ever his faithful companion, lingered nearby, his thoughts a blend of admiration and reflection on the case that had consumed them. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice tinged with awe. You've done it again. Grayson's behind bars, the family's on a path to healing, and Ravenstone's future is secure. But I can't help feeling there's one last piece to this puzzle, something about Lady Eleanor herself, her strength, her secrets. Have we truly uncovered everything? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with a quiet satisfaction. Mon ami, you are perceptive. Oui,
there is always a final key, a truth that lingers beyond the crime. Lady Eleanor, she was the heart of this mystery, and her legacy, it is more than a will or a manor. Today, we shall uncover this final truth, and then Hercule Poirot shall take his leave. The morning was spent in a final review of the case, ensuring no detail had been overlooked. Inspector Davies, now fully convinced of Poirot's brilliance, had sent a final report confirming Grayson's confession and the evidence. The diary, the cyanide receipt, the locket's inscription, and the burned fragment all pointed to a betrayal rooted in 1914, when Grayson had exploited the chaos of war to defraud the Ashbourne estate. Lady Eleanor's discovery of Edward's diary had reignited the past, leading to her fatal confrontation with Grayson. Yet Poirot sensed a deeper layer, a personal truth about Lady Eleanor that had driven her to act so decisively. To explore this, Poirot requested a private meeting with Margaret, whose emotional outburst had been a turning point in the case. They met in the library, where the high-backed chair, now empty, stood as a silent tribute to Lady Eleanor. Margaret, though still fragile, carried a newfound strength.
Your mother, she was a woman of courage, facing a betrayer alone. But there is something more, n'est-ce pas? A reason she kept Edward's diary, his locket, so close to her heart. Can you tell me of her bond with him? Margaret's fingers tightened on her handkerchief, but she nodded. Mother never spoke much of Edward, but he was her world. He was younger, you see, and she protected him always. When he died in the war, it broke her. She kept his things, the locket, his letters, as if they could keep him alive. But last month she told me she'd found something that made her see him differently. Something that gave her purpose. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The something, madame, was it the diary? Yes, Margaret said, her voice trembling. She said it wasn't just about Grayson's betrayal. Edward had written about a promise he'd made to her, to protect the family's honor. She felt she'd failed him by not seeing Grayson's true nature sooner. The new will, the charities, it was her way of keeping that promise. Poirot's mind raced, the final piece falling into place. The locket's inscription, 2E from T, 1914, was not merely a clue to Grayson's guilt, but a symbol of Lady Eleanor's devotion to her brother's memory. The diary, with its account of Grayson's forgery, had been Edward's attempt to safeguard the family, and Lady Eleanor's discovery of it had rekindled her resolve to honor his legacy, even at the cost of her life. To confirm this, Poirot examined the diary's remaining pages, which Davies had returned to the manor. Tucked within was a letter from Edward to Eleanor, dated days before his death in 1914. It read, "My dearest sister, if I fall, know that I tried to protect you. Grayson is not what he seems. Guard Ravenstone, and trust your heart." The letter, written in Edward's careful hand, was a final plea, one Lady Eleanor had taken to heart decades later. "This letter," Poirot told Hastings as they stood in the study, "it is the final key. Lady Eleanor, she was not merely a victim, but a guardian. Her confrontation with Grayson, it was not only about the will, but about fulfilling Edward's promise. She died to protect her family, her home." Hastings, moved by the revelation, nodded. "She was extraordinary, wasn't she? Facing Grayson alone, knowing the risk." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft. "Her courage, it was her legacy. The charities, the new will, they were her way of ensuring Ravenstone's honor, as Edward had wished." Before departing, Poirot gathered the household one last time in the drawing room, the fire casting a warm glow over the crimson walls. Sir Reginald, Clara, Margaret, Dr. Caldwell, Victor, and Evelyn stood together, their faces reflecting a shared
uncovered a betrayal from the past, and in her final act, she protected you all. This letter, from her brother Edward, reveals her true purpose, to honor a promise to safeguard Ravenstone. Her will, her charities, they are her gift to you. Carry it forward with pride. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his voice firm. We will, Mr. Poirot. Mother's vision will live on. Clara, her hand in Reginald's, added, We've learned from her strength. Thank you for showing us. Margaret, tears in her eyes, smiled. She's still with us, in a way. We'll make her proud. Victor, his arm around Evelyn, nodded. No more running. We'll do right by her. Poirot inclined his head, his hat in hand. Then my work here is done. Ravenstone, it is yours to cherish. Adieu. As they left the drawing room, the manor seemed to hum with a quiet vitality, its wounds healing under the weight of truth. The Rolls-Royce awaited, its engine a soft murmur in the crisp air. Poirot settled into the seat, his hands folded neatly, his eyes distant but content. Hastings, beside him, glanced back at the manor. You gave them more than justice, Poirot. You gave them hope. Poirot's smile was faint but warm. Hope, mon ami. It is the fruit of truth. Lady Eleanor, she entrusted me with her final key, and I have turned it. Now we return to London, to await the next puzzle. As the car wound through the Sussex lanes, Ravenstone Manor faded into the distance, its legacy secured by a woman's courage and a detective's brilliance. The downs stretched endlessly, a canvas of light and shadow, and Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells ever vigilant, looked to the horizon, ready for whatever mysteries lay ahead.